are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani, joined with me, as always, it's Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man, so continuing off of what we were doing in last week's episode, so if you haven't checked that out, definitely go do so. But basically what we're doing is we are now asking the question for some of the eliminated teams in the playoffs, what's next? You know, especially with teams, like in the last episode we talked about the Lakers and the Portland Trailblazers. Teams like that have a lot of questions now after a first round exit. And, you know, just the way the season kind of transpired. You know, there's a lot more questions to be answered heading into this offseason. So we wanted to continue that with another couple of teams who we thought are going to have some questions to answer. And those teams are the Miami Heat and the Dallas Mavericks. Both teams eliminated in the first round. Now, obviously, Miami had their was swept by the Bucks, and Dallas was eliminated in seven by the Los Angeles Clippers. But yeah, these two teams are quite interesting in completely different positions, I think. You know, in terms of where they're going to be heading this offseason. You know, especially, I guess, in the sense of the Dallas Mavericks, man, especially with all the news that happened with their franchise.
Yeah, man, this came out of nowhere, honestly. I think you're right about the fact that they're in two different situations. You know, but I think they're also kind of similar in the sense that both teams want to build a contending team. Both teams have some big, you know, moving pieces this offseason. And then, obviously, they have some long-term plans that they need to implement or that they need to execute moving forward. So I think even though these two teams are in kind of different situations, there is a lot of similarities in their situations as well.
Yeah, for sure. But wasting no time, let's jump right into the first team we want to talk about, and that's the Miami Heat. Now, the Miami Heat finished the season with a 40-32 record, which was 6th in the Eastern Conference, so they actually avoided the play-in tournament. But they finished with the 17th ranked offense and the 7th ranked defense in the NBA. And obviously, I just mentioned that earlier, they got swept by the Bucks in the first round, which was also revenge because of what Miami did to Milwaukee in last year's playoffs in the second round. Yes, man, COVID has really affected you. Everything just feels so far away. But yeah, so Miami Heat have had a very interesting season this year. You know, and a lot of it had to do with, you know, the biggest obstacle this year, which was, you know, the COVID protocols and injuries. This team was littered with injuries and COVID violations, like, throughout the year. Like, starting with, like, even to the top guy, like Jimmy Butler was, you know, in and out of the lineup because of injury and the COVID protocol. Bam Adebayo was hurt for a little bit. Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero. The list goes on and on. Like, I looked up their injury report for the season, and it's a very lengthy list.
Yeah, man, they were playing like G League rosters at times, pretty much. Right?
Yeah, and you know, they really didn't have a fully healthy or like a full team. So again, developing that chemistry, developing that rhythm for this team was just so difficult, especially considering the fact that they also had one of the shortest off seasons this year because they made it to the finals last year. So, you know, especially with the short turnaround,
72 days.
You know, 72-day off season, like this team was, you know, probably battling a lot of, you know, injuries and fatigue throughout the year. So that definitely played a factor into how they performed. But their biggest weakness by far is their offense this season. Like, they lost a lot of key veteran players who they thought were going to be replaced by their young players coming up. You know, they lost guys like Jay Crowder, they lost guys like Kelly Olynyk, lost guys like Solomon Hill all throughout this year. And, you know, you wouldn't think these three guys were, you know, crucial to the Miami Heat's success last year, but
especially the first two.
I mean, Kelly Olynyk and Jay Crowder, like they're good players, but they're not like, you know, like, I guess major impact players, you know, unless they're in the right situation. Like, especially in the case of a guy like Kelly Olynyk, like, again, like he's not that great defensively, but you know, you saw what he was able to do offensively for the Miami Heat. So, and Miami really thought that some of their young players were going to step up. Like Tyler Hero had a very bad season this year. I think it's very safe to say that. And, you know, by the way, Miami, the fact that you weren't willing to give him up for Kyle Lowry, kind of shameful on your part. I'm just saying. Now, as Raptor fans, we are kind of grateful you didn't give us Tyler Hero because, again, we all know once you make a rap song about a player, they're never the same after that. You know? But again, it's like, remember Mo Bamba?
Yeah.
Listen, it's a thing. But again, Tyler Hero, not a great season. Duncan Robinson, I think he was okay. Duncan was probably the best of the young players, I think.
I mean, he was what he was, right? And
Yeah.
he is what he is. He's a shooter. He's not a good defender. He's not a playmaker. His job is out there is to shoot.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. The problem is for Miami, when you need more players to step up, a guy who's just going to play his role is not cutting it anymore.
Pretty much. And then obviously, like, you have guys like Kendrick Nunn, again, in and out of the lineup. Does Eric Spoelstra trust him? Does he not trust him? And then obviously sprinkle in KZ Opala, Precious Achua, who I actually quite like.
He was good. He was good.
He was pretty good this season.
He still has a lot of room to develop, but he's very good.
He's very raw, but I think, again, he has that potential to grow. And then even guys like Max Struss, Gabe Vincent, guys who burned the Raptors this year on repeated occasion. But yeah, like, Miami was really hoping that these young players were going to take the next step in their development and fill that void. But clearly they weren't ready for that at this stage. And, again, I think that can be corrected in future years. Obviously, these young players can get better. But in terms of a guy like Duncan Robinson, who's a restricted free agent this year, it really leaves you to question, like, how much are you willing to pay these guys? Or is it worth the money in investing in guys that, you expected to grow but didn't? So that's definitely another problem with the Miami Heat and that they're going to have to answer. I think another contributing factor to their poor offense this year was they play a very slow pace. Now, again, a lot of that has to do with Jimmy Butler and his play style. Jimmy plays a very slow, isolation-heavy play style, and Miami is going to have to adapt to that because that's their best player. But I think what really hurt them from last year and this season was the three-point shooting. I think they were the best three-point shooting team last season.
Well, definitely in the playoffs at least.
Like, they were definitely one of the top three-point shooting teams. This year, they were pretty poor on that side of the ball. Like, very average. I think 19th was the rank this year. And especially from a team that really lacks creators besides Jimmy Butler and Goran Dragic, it's not great that your shooters aren't producing at a high level. And especially when you play slow, again, you're playing slow, it allows the defense to be set, it allows rotation to kind of happen, a lot more fluidly rather than if you're playing a faster pace, it's harder for defenses to get set up. So definitely I think the slow pace was kind of backfired at Miami this year, so they might want to adjust that going forward. And then the last kind of problem of this season that I kind of want to touch upon with the Miami Heat, it's the Victor Oladipo situation. Now again, Miami took a big gamble going after Victor Oladipo because he was looking okay in Houston. Obviously, it was not nearly his Indiana self. But again, the injuries have taken a toll on him, and there was a high possibility that Oladipo was going to miss time because of injury. But Miami still took that gamble, traded Kelly Olynyk, Avery Bradley, and a pick or two, a pick swap, I think, and rolled the dice on Oladipo. Now Oladipo's hurt and is a free agent this summer. So what they do with him is yet to be seen, but they did give up a pretty valuable piece now on Kelly Olynyk.
Well, the thing about the Victor Oladipo thing is that on one hand, you could say it's a lose situation where it blew up in their face. Short term. The thing is about the Victor Oladipo situation, it was worth, I think, the gamble because of the fact that they had another player going out on Kelly Olynyk who was about to be a free agent as well. And they brought in another player who's about to be a free agent. If he didn't work out, cut the cord with him. Done.
Yeah.
They have no commitment to him. And so we'll see what he does this offseason. From what I've seen, I think he might just take a shorter deal to come back to Miami, more like a prove-it deal. And in that case, I think that could have worked well for Miami. So the jury's still out, or the verdict is still out on the Victor Oladipo trade, I think, for the Miami Heat. But it'll definitely be interesting for sure, I think.
Yeah, which, again, now that you kind of touched upon it, and it was a good segue over to the positives that Miami had heading into this offseason. And, the first and probably the biggest thing that everybody's talking about with the Miami Heat, they have a young team, a lot of expiring contracts that end this offseason. So they have a lot of cap space to sign a potential third star to, and fill the roster, with veteran players and players that fit better with what they're trying to do. So that cap space is going to be very valuable. Even, despite them signing a guy like Bam Adebayo to his extension, they still have Goran Dragic is on a team option with $19 million, Andre Iguodala on the team option of $15 million. That's, what is that? It's $35 million. They could easily free up just like that, without even having to dive into tax money or anything of that nature. Then obviously, you have guys like Tyler Heroes on the team option, pick that up. And then the rest of the team is just young players. So Miami didn't have a lot of money to play with in terms of how they can restructure their team. The question really becomes who they're going to go out and get, which I'll touch upon in a bit. But that is such a major positive for this team because, again, it could be a quick turnaround and they can be right back in the contention as early as next season. The other thing is they also have, with these young players, they're basically trade chips. Now, Miami traded a lot of their picks away, which, again, you can, judge whether or not that was foolish or not. But for Miami, they're chasing a championship. So for them, it really doesn't matter. But they do have these young players. They do have these young prospects that, if packaged within the right deal, could net them even more players, more veterans, and really help bolster the team even further to put them in contending status. I think, a guy like Tyler Hero might be on the trade block. Who knows? Again, he's a young player, but does he fit Miami's timeline? Like, he's 21 years old. Miami's trying to win now.
One thing I will add to that, on top of the list of names that you mentioned, is Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson is an interesting name because of the fact that he's about to be a restricted free agent. Now, ideally, Miami would love to have him back. He does a lot for Miami's offense. We've seen in the playoffs for the last 2 years. When teams are able to neutralize him, Miami's offense just falls off a cliff, right? Duncan Robinson is one of the best shooters in the game. Not to mention the fact that, despite the fact that he's not a great defender, he's not a complete liability like a lot of other shooters because of the fact that he is 6'7", so he's able to at least, lengthwise stick onto players. Now again, ideally you'd love to have Duncan Robinson back if you're the Miami Heat, but exactly at what cost? In terms of the fact that Miami's trying to go after another big name player, after another star perhaps. And if they're able to do that, then Duncan Robinson is definitely not in their timeline, or not in their peripheral. And if they want to fill out the roster a bit more rather than commit all that money to Duncan Robinson, that's also an option. So Duncan Robinson, I think, is a very interesting name for the Miami Heat.
Yeah, they're definitely going to have to make a decision on him, but I think one other point that you got to mention is they can find someone to replace Duncan Robinson, especially within the free agent class. I'll bring up a couple of names who you can possibly bring in, but again, it really depends on how much Duncan would want on the open market and what type of offer sheets are available, etc. But I think you also touched upon a little bit on my next point on what the good going forward in Miami is Heat culture. The culture that they build being a good defensive ball club, a team that is going to play hard each and every single night, is still going to be there. Because again, you have your core pieces. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo are still going to be there. Eric Spoelstra is there. Pat Riley's there. The culture is still intact. All you need is to bring in guys who fit that culture, who fit the vision of the team, and you can have easily a contending team in the Eastern Conference by next season. So those are the positives for the Miami Heat heading into the offseason. So now, who should they possibly go after? Now, this is where things get a little more wide open for the Miami Heat because there's just so many possibilities for them. Obviously the most rumored player that Miami can possibly go after is Kyle Lowry in free agency. Now, they were interested at the trade deadline to make a deal for Lowry, but obviously the deal fell through because Miami wasn't willing to give up Tyler Hero, and the Raptors were like, "You're going to give us Tyler Hero," But the deal fell through. But Miami still has more than enough cap space to sign Kyle Lowry to a pretty lucrative deal. I think Lowry will command in the market between 20 to 25, maybe $27 million a season. But
definitely over 24, I would say.
It really depends on which team he ends up going with. But again, Miami has more than enough money if they, let go of one of Iguodala or Dragic, which is very likely. I think if they sign Lowry, Dragic is pretty much as good as gone, and I think Iguodala just makes too much money for his age at this stage of his career. So Kyle Lowry is definitely the interesting one. I think he's going to be one of Miami's top targets. Kyle has also been very interested in Miami as well. Another name that has been floating out there is Kawhi Leonard. Now, this is very unlikely, but again, Miami can make it work if they really want to. The difference with Kawhi Leonard is that it really depends on how the Clippers finish their season. And as it stands at the time of recording this, it looks more likely than not that Kawhi is going to resign. Especially given the circumstances that the Clippers can make a push for a conference finals, more likely than not he's going to stay. So, but Kawhi's definitely out there. Another name that I thought was very interesting that could be possible was DeMar DeRozan. When I talk about Miami's pace, their play style, it really reminded me of what DeMar DeRozan loves to do. He loves to be a slow-paced, mid-range type of player. And again, a lot of people say the mid-range is dead. Well, now you have two. If you get DeMar, you have two of the best mid-range scorers in the NBA, DeMar DeRozan and Jimmy Butler. So putting those two guys in there will help you in the playoffs. Surround them with shooters. It could work. Obviously Miami would still need a point guard, but they can definitely add DeMar. DeMar would improve their scoring right away, and I think he'd be definitely an interesting option. I think for this Heat team. A lot of people aren't really talking about it that much. Another option we always touched on is re-signing Victor Oladipo for a relatively cheaper, proven type of deal. On the table, definitely still on the table. I think for Oladipo, it's going to be probably his best option, just because who knows what the open market is going to be and the status of his injury. Those were kind of the star players I was kind of leaning toward. Miami could also even sign role players, like guys like Danny Green would be perfect for Miami. A replacement of Duncan Robinson would be a guy like JJ Redick is another guy, because I think he'd be much cheaper than Duncan Robinson. He can still provide you the same skill set, veteran experience, playoff experience. JJ Redick is definitely an option. So if you move on from Duncan, you don't want to pay him $20+ million. Pay a guy like JJ Redick $10, maybe $12 million a season. Would definitely work out. Another option if they miss out on Kyle Lowry would be a Spencer Dinwiddie. Spencer Dinwiddie, obviously in Brooklyn, Brooklyn really don't have the money to pay him what he's looking at getting paid at. Obviously, this guy wants to be paid in cryptocurrency at this point.
Yeah, Spencer Dinwiddie's an interesting guy, man. I can't hate it. He's an interesting guy.
Interesting guy, man. Literally putting up on Twitter, be like, "Yo, what teams should I go back?"
Yo, that was funny. That was funny.
It was too fun. But definitely, I can see him going into Miami. He would definitely be a good fit culture-wise for what they want to do. A hard-nosed, scrappy type of player. Definitely fits, and especially if they lose out on a guy like Kyle Lowry, Spencer Dinwiddie is a very good alternative for them. And then finally, Serge Ibaka. I personally don't see him sticking around with the Clippers, just based on the way the season went. And, I think his role with the Clippers just makes no sense. I think they really like Ivica Zubac, so that's why I think for Serge it makes more sense to go on a team like Miami, where you are pretty much guaranteed to get minutes either at the backup 5 position, or even you could start next to Bam at the 4. So it could definitely work out for Serge to go there, but I think the underlying message I'm going to get at is Miami has a lot of players they can go after. With the amount of money they have, with the type of roster fluidity they can make, it's very interesting to see what Miami can do. And I think they have so much flexibility that literally they can retool their entire team this offseason back in contention next year.
Yeah, man. One more thing about Miami that I think a lot of their plans hinge on. And something that really, I think, showed its head in the playoffs is Bam Adebayo and the development of his offensive game. Yeah. Now, Bam Adebayo has exceeded all of our expectations. We can clearly say that for sure.
Yeah.
He's already an all-NBA defender. He's a great passer at the big man position. He
handles the ball very well.
Handles the ball very well. The problem is his shooting, his offensive game, his ability to put up points. And you really started to struggle with that when there wasn't a Jimmy Butler type of guy on the floor. When there wasn't someone who would take the defense's attention. When the defense's attention was fully, fixated on Bam Adebayo, he really, really struggled. And that contributed a lot to the Miami Heat's lack of success. Especially we saw that in the playoffs where the Milwaukee Bucks pretty much defended the Miami Heat as good as anyone. With the way Brook Lopez was playing and, the Milwaukee Bucks and their strategy which was pretty much daring Bam Adebayo to hit those mid-range jumpers. They would take away his passing lanes, and by setting off of him, he wouldn't be able to hit those cutters, right? So when they let him shoot those mid-range jumpers, and he was clearly unwilling to take them, Miami just fell apart. They literally just fell apart on the offensive end without Bam Adebayo and his facilitating abilities. So if Miami wants to take that next step moving forward, a lot of it is also going to hinge on Bam Adebayo and not being a liability in terms of being an offensive threat.
Yeah, but I think that, again, if Miami's able to get that third star, that should alleviate some of the pressure off Bam. So we should see Bam return the form. But again, you're right in the sense that we want to see that offensive growth from the player, from Bam. And, if he can get to that level, that'll make Miami even better. But I think the objective is to get another star, relieve the pressure off of Bam, kind of create a good three-way tandem, for them to work with.
Yeah, pretty much. So that was the Miami Heat and what was next, or what is next for the Miami Heat and their plans moving forward this offseason. Moving on to the Dallas Mavericks, and they've been recently in the news for a lot of the stuff, or a lot of not good stuff, actually.
Yeah, bro, you see that ESPN doc for Boban? That's the real stuff.
Yeah. Boban's goal, bro.
Good watch.
Shout out Boban for sure. When we're talking about the Dallas Mavericks, because of the fact that it's in the news recently, and it's such a dominating headline and dominating presence across their organization, and especially in the last couple of years, I'm not going to talk about the stuff that's happened before, but if you know what I'm referring to, over the last, 2 years ago or whatever it was, a lot of cultural issues within the workplace, and this is only being brought forward even further in this offseason. And so the first step for the Dallas Mavericks in moving forward this offseason is to figure out their front office stuff, is to figure out their organizational stuff. So the first thing that happened one of the things that happened is that Rick Carlisle, after 13 seasons of coaching the Dallas Mavericks, stepped down. Now, in our last episode, I did say that I think Rick Carlisle needs to go. I didn't think it would happen this soon, but hey, I guess
I didn't think it would happen because Mark Cuban literally came out and said, Rick Carlisle, the coach. So when the owner comes out and says, no, this guy is the coach, that pretty much means your job is safe. So this Rick Carlisle has really admitted that this is his decision. Now, what the underlying reasons are, we can speculate all we want, but...
Well, that brings me to my point about the fact that Rick Carlisle stepped down despite Mark Cuban clearly saying that this was their coach. And that brings me to my point about they need to find a coach that will work well with Luka, that will listen to Luka, and hold guys accountable on the defensive end, and play guys in the roles that they're supposed to be suited to. And I'll talk about this a bit later as well. We saw that clearly Luka Doncic was not the biggest fan of Rick Carlisle. And though I will say Rick Carlisle has his own issues. But I will say, his ability to hold guys accountable, I still respected that aspect of, his coaching ability. But I will agree with Luka on some of the stuff that he had issues with Rick Carlisle with. Mainly there's that one moment in the playoffs where, the timeout, exactly, where the Dallas Mavericks, I think it might be in game 6, if I'm not mistaken, had all of their momentum moving forward, and Rick Carlisle called a timeout. Despite Luka Doncic clearly saying he wanted to get the ball in bounds. So that was just, I think, one of the many moments that encapsulated the relationship between Rick Carlisle and Luka Doncic. And that definitely played a factor into Rick Carlisle's departure. The next thing that happened for the Dallas Mavericks is that the president and GM, Donnie Nelson, was fired. Which, again, relating it back to their star player, Luka Doncic, and Luka even admitted himself that this was a tough move for him and a tough decision for him because of the fact that Donnie Nelson was the first guy to introduce him and to get him on board on the Dallas Mavericks.
He drafted him.
Exactly, he drafted him. So after a number of years as well, that's another guy out the picture. And so they've reportedly been looking at their VP, Michael Finley, to be Donnie Nelson's possible replacement. And then finally, you have all the reports surrounding Bob Voulgaris, who is the director of quantitative research and development. With him, I'm not gonna restate what the report was saying, but if you guys want to read the report, it was out there. That reportedly he was influencing too many decisions and too many important decisions within the Dallas Mavericks front office because of the fact that he had a good relationship with Mark Cuban. And that a number of players and organizational executives do not like him, namely Luka Doncic. So there's all of these reports out there, which Mark Cuban obviously denied.
I mean, he kind of has to.
Yeah, he has to, right? But that brings me to my main point once again about the Dallas Mavericks and their front office and their cultural environment. I think kind of the opposite of what the Miami Heat are, right? Where the Miami Heat are a stabilizing force, a top of the line cultural environment across looked at across the league. The Dallas Mavericks have kind of embodied the opposite of that, namely with the stuff that's going on right now and then the stuff that's happened over the past number of years.
They've had this stability at ownership, but Mark Cuban's obviously such a huge personality that it's tough for him to get that balance. I think, and I think in the sense of for Miami, does anyone know what Mick Harrison is? Does anyone know who he is? Like, we all know what Mark Cuban is. So
Miami Heat, the guy that runs and the guy that you think of with the Miami Heat is Pat Riley, right? And Pat Riley, we know, doesn't play no games. He's a godfather. Yeah. That brings me to my next point about the Dallas Mavericks, which is their salary cap and their spreadsheet. They have around $20 million in cap space for the 2021 offseason. That's taking into account if they get rid of Willie Cauley-Stein, who is on a team option. If they decline his team option, which is for around $4.1 million, they'll have around $20 million in cap space, which is a good thing. However, they need to re-sign Tim Hardaway Jr. Obviously you could say, is he really worth the money that he's going to want? Maybe, probably not.
I mean, based on the way he played and what he's done for Dallas, he's earned the money. He's
earned the money. However, knowing Tim Hardaway's history and knowing the type of impact he could have or could not have, some may look at it as Dallas Mavericks. They shouldn't pay him what he wants. However, again, like Hani said, given the impact that he's had on the Dallas Mavericks, it's kind of a necessity for them to re-sign him. And he's definitely going to be commanding at least $21 million. Right now, he was getting paid $18.9 million. So he's definitely going to be looking for a pay raise. So if you want to be able to pay him and re-sign him, that pretty much that's pretty much all of your free cap space. Another guy that's going to be a free agent is Boban.
Bro, immediate
you have to re-sign him.
Bro, Luka's Luka's best friend. Luka just lost his coach. He lost his GM. Bro, you can't take away Boban, man.
Yeah.
He's a lovable guy, man.
Well, that's my point, right? He's a great locker room presence. Everyone that's had him in their locker room has stated how big of a presence that he actually was. And we know firsthand how big these presences are throughout the season. Exactly. And especially in the playoffs, you need those kind of guys on the bench, which is why guys like Udonis Haslem, Andre Iguodala, all have jobs to this day, right? Andre Iguodala is not washed completely, but he's getting it, right? And then for the final point is that Luka Doncic is approaching his Supermax extension, right? He's eligible to sign a Supermax, which will kick in after next season. So any salary cap projections or plans that you have, financial plans that you have to take into account Luka Doncic and his Supermax money. So it'll definitely be interesting.
That's going to be a big contract.
Exactly, that's going to be a big contract. And so it's definitely going to be interesting what the Dallas Mavericks do with their financials moving forward. Arguably, I think the biggest portion or the biggest dominating factor of their salary cap and their salary sheet is Kristaps Porzingis. Now, that brings me to my next point about the Dallas Mavericks and their direction. They had to figure out what to do with the Kristaps Porzingis situation. The reality of the matter is that it's not very easy at all to figure out what to do with him.
Near impossible.
And their only option, as of right now, at least within, he does have 3 years remaining with $102 million guaranteed. His last year is a player option for $36 million. Which he will definitely not decline. The issue for the Dallas Mavericks is that right now, they kind of have no choice except to just stick with him, right? There's not really much else you can do. Hani, when we were talking about the episode, Hani brought up a possible trade scenario with, for example, the Washington Wizards, where, you give up a large amount of money, say Bradley Beal is involved in the trade somehow, multiple draft picks being involved.
Well, the gist of the idea really relies upon the fact that the only way Dallas can make it work is if there's a disgruntled star on another team who, is the other team wanting to move, and that other team can see a possibility that Kristaps Porzingis can fit on the team. So obviously they can see, okay, young player, there's still potential, and he can work on our roster. But Dallas is going to have to give him a lot of pieces to make the deal more attractive. And that's what kind of Washington has a possibility to it, because Bradley Beal, I don't know if he wants to stay in Washington long term. If he asks for a trade, Washington can say, hey, we have Westbrook. Westbrook works well with bigs who can spread the ball, spread the floor. It could work financially if we're given enough pieces to be more incentivized to trade our best player.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally what it is. But the point of the matter is that the Dallas Mavericks kind of have no choice.
Yeah.
Have no choice with Kristaps Porzingis. The unfortunate thing about Kristaps Porzingis is that we thought it would be a great fit, a seamless fit with Luka Doncic. The reality is
healthy Porzingis.
Yes, exactly. The reality is that it hasn't been a great fit with Luka Doncic. First of all, he's regressed a ton after his injuries, which, given his stature as a big man, is kind of expected, unfortunately. His defense has fallen off a cliff. He was anchoring the New York defense when he was playing for the Knicks. His defense has fallen off a cliff. His offensive game has not been great as well.
Bro, and again, 7-3, take layups.
Exactly, bro. He himself hasn't produced as much as the Dallas Mavericks had hoped, and as a result, it hasn't worked well with Luka Doncic at all. There's those reports out there of the fact that Luka and Kristaps don't hang out at all. They're not really friends, which again could still work, but it makes it that much harder to build that chemistry on the court. And you can clearly see the effects of it on the court when Kristaps Porzingis wants to go and Luka Doncic doesn't even look at him. Or, Luka Doncic just simply ignores him. Or if Kristaps gets the ball, it's not going back to Luka Doncic at all. So there's these underlying issues of the whole dynamic and the relationship between Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. What hasn't also helped in that matter, which was probably a reason why Rick Carlisle was fired, was because of his mismanagement of Kristaps Porzingis and how to use him. I touched upon this a couple of episodes ago as well. Kristaps Porzingis did not help his case with the way he played and obviously with the injuries. However, I did not like the way Rick Carlisle used Kristaps Porzingis at all. There was that quote about a year ago, I think, or last season, whatever it was, where Rick Carlisle, a reporter asked Rick Carlisle why he doesn't post up Kristaps Porzingis when it worked so well for the New York Knicks. And Rick Carlisle said the post up is not a good play in today's NBA, which is completely absurd, right? And that's pretty bad coming from your head coach. And you could see it in the system that they ran, where Kristaps Porzingis, unfortunately, with all the tools that he has and all the gifts that he has, was forced to pretty much just stand around on the perimeter all day. And that's not how you utilize a 7'3" guy who can post up, shoot, and dribble the ball, right? So it clearly has not been a great fit for Kristaps Porzingis across any level.
It also doesn't help that, when you're talking about the Luka situation, first off, Luka's favorite big man on the team has already been filled by Boban.
Yeah.
Second of all, Kristaps, if you're getting outplayed by Boban, and Boban doesn't play as much as he does, because again, defensive liability, but Boban's still effective and efficient because he used to go, but he's still more efficient and effective than you was. That's telling something.
To give him some props, though, Kristaps did play, I think, pretty good defense against the Clippers. Unfortunately, it was just bad offense all around, I think, across the team, minus Luka Doncic. And that brings me to my final 2 points about the Dallas Mavericks and what they need to work on overall in terms of roster construction. The first thing they need is defense. They were ranked 19th overall this season, and that's been the recurring theme for them over their Luka Doncic tenure and for a number of years before. They're a good offensive team. Last year, they were a historically great offensive team. Unfortunately, their defense is not good at all, and that gets them in trouble in the playoffs. And we know in the playoffs for the past 2 seasons, the blueprint of the Dallas Mavericks' success has been for Luka Doncic to drop like 40 points and for the Dallas Mavericks to be able to get to like 140 points. And that's just not sustainable over the course of the playoffs. So they definitely need some more defense, and that's only been contributed by the decline of Kristaps Porzingis, who they had hoped could be that stabilizing force on defense. Unfortunately, it just hasn't worked out because of injuries. They desperately need some wings on the defensive end, and we saw this particularly against the Clippers with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Now, Maxi Kleber and Dorian Finney-Smith are not bad defenders by any stretch. Dorian Finney-Smith, I actually like him a lot. He's a very good defender, I will say. He's a very good player overall. Unfortunately, you just need a couple more of those guys that can help you out in the playoffs, especially to mask up the deficiencies of guys like Luka Doncic in the lineup, and then, obviously on the defense.
Well, they thought they were getting that with Josh Richardson, but clearly Josh Richardson was just not the same player anymore.
Well, not the same player. He was never that player in the first place.
Like, he had a good couple of years in Miami, and then it just kind of fell apart.
Pretty much, yeah. So some guys that I could throw out there, and these are just a couple of examples, is Danny Green, first of all. Now, we could make fun of his offensive game, blah, blah, blah. He did shoot 40% from three, or around 40% from three this year. Obviously, in the playoffs, it's been a different story once again. But we know what he brings on the defensive end in terms of his IQ, his length, just the smarts that he has on the defensive end.
8 on Danny, but he's got 3 rings.
Exactly. And reportedly, it was between the Mavericks and the Lakers last season for who he was going to sign if. He definitely made the right choice in the Los Angeles sign. Another guy is Trevor Ariza. Now, he is getting up there in age as well. However, his stint with Miami Heat showed he could still be a valuable contributor in the league right now.
Also be cheaper than a guy like Danny Green.
Exactly. And then finally, PJ Tucker. And we've seen what he's done for the Milwaukee Bucks in terms of getting them that defensive IQ, that
almost
defensive
fighting.
Exactly, that toughness, right? They need some of that. They hope to get that with guys like Willie Cauley-Stein, James Johnson. Unfortunately, James Johnson, for his part, just wasn't good enough to even stick on the court.
Well, he didn't have the offensive skills that you would need to put next to Luka. Like, James Johnson's not really a shooter.
Exactly.
A guy like PJ Tucker would fit perfect against the Luka because best corner 3-point shooter in the game is PJ Tucker. So
at least last year.
Listen, it's still there. PJ Tucker, he's still one of those versatile players that will still be able to be effective, I think.
Exactly. And these are just some of the names I named out there. There's probably other names. But you get the point that I'm trying to make. They need some defensive-minded wings who can get it done for them, who can, hinder some of their, mask up some of their deficiencies on the defensive end.
Words are hard.
Yeah, words are hard, man, especially being tired. And then also, we saw this in the playoffs, especially against the Clippers. And this was a very, very glaring problem throughout the season. And again, like I said, especially in the playoffs, is their lack of secondary playmakers next to Luka Doncic. When Luka Doncic was in the game, the Mavericks were great. They were fine. When he stepped off the court, they completely crumbled. Now, Jalen Brunson, I still like him as a player, but he's just not that guy, to help you in these situations in the playoffs. He's just another nice rotation piece. Pretty much, yeah. And you definitely need another guy who can help you out if you're, Luka Doncic. He has to carry such a load offensively. He has, one of the highest usage rates already in NBA history. Now, I will say some of that I think can be attributed to him and is a bit of his fault as well. He does have a tendency to hold the ball a bit too much, I will say. And if he's not holding the ball, he kind of does the James Harden thing of standing in the corner, standing at the top, way away from the action, and pretty much not doing anything for the rest of the possession. So I will put some blame on Luka Doncic for that. However, it's clear that the Dallas Mavericks definitely need a secondary playmaker next to him to ease some of that burden. Now, Tim Hardaway Jr. is there, but again, he's not a facilitator like Luka Doncic. You need another guy that can facilitate and get people the ball. Some guys that I'm going to name are Derrick Rose, for example. Probably not going to happen given his contract. Yeah, he'll definitely want a bigger contract. Reggie Jackson's an interesting name. I don't know if it would work well in the Dallas Mavericks system, but another guy that can facilitate and score the ball for you. And then one other guy that I've brought up a couple of times and is, I guess one of my favorite players in the league now, Jordan McLaughlin. Again, he's an end of the bench kind of guy, but he's another guy that you can throw in there to help get guys the ball and attack the paint a bit. There's probably other guys out there, but again, you guys get my point of what I'm trying to say. You need another guy that can ease that burden of Luka Doncic, and especially when he's off the court, help facilitate and run the offense as normal.
Yeah, another name you can possibly go to Patty Mills. People work really well, but even a guy like Kyle Lowry would be perfect for Dallas. The problem is them money-wise, getting a guy like Lowry is going to be tough for them, and signing Hardaway, but crazy things have happened in the NBAs. But like those are the type of players that Dallas really needs to be successful. So I mean, I guess the overall with the Dallas Mavericks has just been that they're there, but they're a playoff team. They just gotta make those changes to really maximize their potential to be a contending team, especially when you have a generational talent like Luka Doncic. You know, you got to do everything you can. Mark Cuban, the thing with the Mavs, Mark Cuban is not afraid to spend money, so he will pay luxury tax money if he knows he has a chance to win. So definitely going to be an interesting offseason for the Dallas Mavericks as well as the Miami Heat. Finally, to end off this episode, we're going to be bringing up the up and under segment. Now, there is a lot of stuff to talk about. First off, the segment. Now, this is something that happened recently today and really just shook the entire media landscape. But it's our first trade of the offseason. So, are you up or under on Brad Stevens' first move as Celtics president? And it's a big one. It's basically the trade that sent Kemba Walker to the Oklahoma City Thunder along with the 16th overall pick in this upcoming draft and a 2025 second round pick, in exchange for Al Horford, Moses Brown, and a 2023 second round pick. Now, Brad Stevens really loves Al Horford. He really wanted him to stay, when he was a free agent a few seasons ago, and now he's back.
Yeah, he's back. Listen, man, I'm off on it. A lot of people are saying across social media that the Celtics got finessed in this trade. I don't really think so. And a lot of it just hinges on Kemba Walker and his inability to play good basketball over the past couple of years for the Celtics. Now, again, if Kemba turns back into Charlotte, his Charlotte mode, then my opinion might change. But based on what he's become over the past couple of seasons, I don't think it was a bad move from the Celtics' point of view. Now, obviously, they did give up, potential All-Star, and then obviously the 16th pick in this year's draft and another pick on top of that. But they got a guy in Al Horford. They saved $20 million off that Kemba deal by trading for Al Horford. They get Al Horford back onto the Celtics, who Brad Stevens loved and who played very well for them. And, for the OKC Thunder, he did play pretty solid as well. So you could hopefully see him back, contribute to a lot of success for the Boston Celtics. They also got Moses Brown, and I was kind of surprised that OKC parted ways with Moses Brown because of the fact that he showed so much potential for the Thunder. He looked like a very good player in the limited time that he played on the floor, and I think for me it was very surprising that they just let him into this deal. So I think that for me might have been the most surprising aspect of this deal. But I think for both teams, I think it did what they wanted. I think it worked out, at least right now, for both sides.
I looking at it based on what you were telling me about it, I get why the Celtics did the main trade, because obviously they were going to trade Kemba regardless. My only question is, why was it Al Horford? Because I know Al Horford was great for Boston. I know all that. But Brad Stevens is no head coach of the Boston Celtics. Now, does that mean the system is going to change? Who really knows? The Celtics haven't really named their head coach replacement yet. But in terms of pure age and value, to me, it's a little tough to see how this is going to play out. Now, for Oklahoma City, this is a great move. They get rid of Al Horford's money. They get Kemba Walker. They get another pick because Sam Presti is hoarding every single draft pick. You can't miss on those picks. So if you miss on those picks, so that's true.
Another Boston.
But listen, he has 5 picks in this draft from between pick 1 and pick 36. Mm-hmm. 5 picks, so he can move 2, 3, all of them for a lot of good pieces. So the fact of the matter is, Sam Presti has got more draft picks. He's got another trade chip in Kemba Walker. They can flip Kemba still. It's not like it's impossible for them to flip Kemba Walker. So that's very good for the Thunder. But for the Celtics, I'm really trying to figure out what their idea is, because now they've got a huge role at point guard they're going to have to fill. So let's see what Brad Stevens does now moving forward.
I mean, for the Celtics, Kemba Walker was not playing great for them anyways. They get Al Horford back. They get a nice piece in Moses Brown, a nice young piece, and they get a pick on top of them. So given the fact that Kemba Walker's contract was huge and you didn't really have many options to trade him.
But was this the best offer you got? That's my question.
I don't know.
We don't know. We won't know. But I'm still questioning whether or not this was the best offer the Celtics could have gotten.
Next up, are you up or under on the Pelicans and head coach Stan Van Gundy parting ways after their first season together?
This is becoming a very recurring theme in this offseason so far. A lot of first year head coaches getting fired after one season. It's pretty unprecedented, to be honest with you. But the Pelicans really didn't have a great year. They started off the year very well, and then just completely fell apart. And I think we were very questionable on the Stan Van Gundy hire to begin with, because we were like, how good is Stan really? Like, is he? Like, it's the same thing that we were saying about Tom Thibodeau. Like, these are coaches that are kind of stuck in their ways, does really only one thing well. And in the case of Stan Van Gundy, his calling go to the defense.
Yeah.
But the Pelicans were garbage on the defensive side of the ball.
It wasn't even that they were garbage, it's that they made so many mistakes, like laughable mistakes on a nightly basis.
I mean, have you seen what Stan Van Gundy was playing on the sideline? Like, listen, that was a mistake in and of itself. And I think a lot of why they brought him in was because of what he was able to do with Dwight Howard, and then they can replicate some of that with Zion Williamson. Now, the problem is, the Pelicans really need to figure out who they want to build around. Is it Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram's team? You got to figure that out, because you can't have both these two guys over that need the ball, that, have two completely different play styles, that, it's really, really hard to find a direction for this team unless you figure out who's your number one guy. So I don't think Stan Van Gundy wasn't the guy for this team. And now there's reports that, moving us on into the next point, are you up or under? And Zion Williamson's family is reportedly unhappy with the Pelicans and how they utilized him, how they built the team around him.
I'm under on it. And I'll say this, first of all, they're all entitled to feel unhappy or happy, with whatever. It's a joke, right? They're entitled to feel however they feel about it. But I'm under on it in the sense of the adding problem of, the problem that's being recurring around the league, which is superstars having a bit too much power, right? The NBA is a very player-friendly league. However, it's getting to the point now where it's getting a bit too much for, and we both said it numerous times, right? Where guys are making that commitment to their contract and then just completely leaving or, not going through on those commitments. And, everyone wanting to move to the big markets.
Well,
New York or LA.
I'll say this about Zion Williamson. Some of this has to be on you. The biggest question about with you, no one's denying your raw talent and potential. You gotta stay physically healthy to be able to to last an NBA season. You can't just keep getting hurt every 5 seconds. You can't just be babied so much. Just because you're 6'4", but you're 300 pounds. Like, it's one of those situations for Zion Williamson that, like, you want him, you can't have it both ways. The Pelicans are doing everything they can to build a team around you. Now, yes, could you question some of the decisions David Griffin had made? Yeah, but it's a pretty decent roster.
In fairness to Zion Williamson, he himself never said anything, and he himself has always had a good attitude, I think. It's just the precedent that has been set before.
I mean,
and then
exactly.
And then just the feelings that this report entails, based on what's already happened before and the ongoing issue I think the NBA has to deal with. I just don't like the impact that this report might bring across the league.
Yeah.
Next up, are you up or under on the Pacers head coach Nate Bjorkgren being fired as well after one season?
Yeah, I'm kind of up on it in the sense that we kind of talked about it when the report kind of came out about Nate Bjorkgren, but there was just too much going on with the locker room on that team that it was just very hard to see how they brought him back. Like, I get it, it was the first year, and again, if it was up to me, I think I would have given Nate another chance, another year. But I think the Pacers were really kind of like, listen, we brought you in for a purpose, and you weren't able to do that. So, and you lost the locker room in the process. So, I think for Nate Bjorkgren, it definitely hurts because this is his first NBA coaching job. But again, I think he can recover his image. Go back, work on Nick Nurse a little bit, and maybe recreate your image in that light. So, but it does kind of suck for Nate Bjorkgren.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with as well. And it kind of sucks because, as Raptors fans, we all look at Nate Bjorkgren as like a really good coach.
Well, he's a big part of our
success. Unfortunately, in Indiana, it just completely blew up pretty much, which was sad because of the fact that it started off so well.
Yeah.
They were playing a completely different brand of basketball. They were playing a very good brand of basketball that worked well with the personnel that they had, and it seemed to be that like everything was going well. And then they just went on a tailspin after like the first quarter of the season, and then obviously all the reports, as you said, came out about Nate Bjorkgren.
The Oladipo and the Levert and the Harden trade really kind of was the main driving force because that's where things really changed.
Yeah. And I guess Nate Bjorkgren, I mean, if the reports are true, man, that's like, you can't bring it back after that, right? So
it's really tough, man. And I think for the Pacers, I think they're just they feel they can contend right now, and they want someone who can help them maximize their team. And Nate Bjorkgren lost a lot. So yeah, that was that. And finally, here's something great news to Zeeshan. Audio up-rounder, the Washington Wizards and Scott Brooks agreed to part ways after contract negotiations went nowhere.
I mean, I'm up on it. And it's not just because it's a good thing for me. Obviously, I don't want people getting fired. I don't like people losing their jobs. But it's not a good thing for me. It's a good thing for the Washington Wizards fan base because they finally got rid of Scott Brooks. This guy was terrible, to say the least.
Listen,
he was absolutely terrible.
He was there for 6 years, and he made this team progressively worse each season. 5, felt like 6, whatever. But he's been there those seasons, and he made the team progressively worse each year. Like at that point, like you gotta be canned. I'm sorry.
And like he was never a good coach to begin with. We said that. Literally, I said that when he got hired 5 years ago. I was like, this is not a good hire. And over 5 years, I've just been proven right by that. And again, like I said, Scott Brooks was on my list of guys to get fired, and he pretty much did get fired, right? We can say, they can say a contract negotiation impacts or whatever they want to say. The point was, he pretty much got fired because the Washington Wizards knew he wasn't worth the money that he wanted. And so, Scott Brooks should have been fired a long time ago. We know this. I've said it numerous times already. This guy sucked as a coach. No offense. He's probably a good assistant coach. But yeah, as a head coach, man, he sucked.
Yeah, he should be gone, man. But how Luke Walton still has a job? Who really knows?
Next up.
Yeah, probably next up.
I will say probably.
Next up.
It's Sacramento Kings.
With that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various podcasting platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, YouTube, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us with the FANATICS podcast. Also, check us out on social media, Twitter, Instagram at @UpletterPodcast, Facebook.com/UpletterPodcast. So all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or reaction videos as they occur. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. Also, check out our website, UpletterPodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we write blog posts with every single episode. So if you don't have time to listen or watch the full thing, you can read about it on our website. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. And yeah, man. We're getting very close to the NBA Finals. Very, very close. More offseason content is going to be on the way, so definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, with that concludes this week's episode. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.